Right, what's happening, people, and welcome back to the Joey Knight Boxing channel. Saturday night, it all went down from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Last Crescendo, and we were live as your alternative commentary on DAZN, and most importantly, live on the Pain Game. I absolutely loved this stream. Here with me, as you can see, is the big dog, my friend Brian, the true Geordie. Brian, how you doing, mate?
All good, bro. It was a fucking great night, mate. Loved it.
Tired?
I'm a little bit, but it was worth it. Like, we got I called it a 7-course meal on my video. It was like an unbelievable, gluttonous fest of top-level boxing. And I just wish every boxing event was like that. That's the best compliment I can give it.
Josh said we were live for about 7.5 hours.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. It didn't feel that way, though. It felt like it went over quite quickly.
It didn't feel like that at all. And normally I feel like there's always this build-up and this anticipation to the main event. And although you're watching the fights, you're constantly referencing back to the main event and whatnot. This card started off on fire, by the way, with Joshua BUATSI against Callum Smith as the opener. We will touch on that. I'm going to do things in a little bit of an unorthodox order. I want to start with what I believe was the biggest talking point of the week, and it's ironic that this was because obviously we had an undisputed fight. Very rarely will you get an undisputed fight. Very rarely will you get an undisputed rematch, and very rarely will you get a different winner in the rematch, depending on how you interpreted the first fight and who you had winning it. But the story of the event for me was very much the pullout of Daniel Dubois in his fight against Joseph Parker. Now, when that news broke, I was in the gym. I had to check my phone, and obviously I came back and there was probably 100 texts from you guys in the Pain Game WhatsApp group chat discussing who could be alternative opponents, who was most likely to be offered it. We actually hadn't really suggested Martin Bakole, had we, when we hadn't been told initially?
I think it was Wardley was the first name who came up because he tweeted something out, but yeah.
What were your excitement levels when you found out that it was Martin Bakole? Because I was buzzing.
I was on a 10. I was absolutely thrilled. I was like, that is the best replacement possible. And surely Martin Bakole would only have put his hand up and said, aye, if he had been in some sort of fighting shape, right? I'm not expecting him 100%, but what I'm talking about is I'm not expecting him to be completely flat or worse, fat and completely out of shape. You know, you're expecting him to have been ticking over was the general consensus in the group chat of, he's going to be a threat early on here and he won't be completely out of shape.
So I said on the stream that I was backing a Parker points win, but I said if it goes within 4, I would edge towards that being Martin Bakole. It did go within 4. It wasn't Martin Bakole. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, it was Joseph Parker within 2. Martin Bakole in those first couple of rounds, how did he look for you?
Well, he's always flat-footed, and I wasn't expecting his timing to look great because he hasn't been potentially like training for a title level fight. But he did have some nice little moments. He landed, I think, a good uppercut at one point. He looked dangerous. I probably edged the round to him. Do you know what I mean? But that being said, normally Martin Bakole throws quite a lot of punches and can maintain quite a good level of output for a man who's nearly 300 pounds usually. Normally, in the last fight, he was 285 pounds, 20 stone, that is, for those who don't know the conversion. And in this fight, he was 315 pounds, which is like 22 and a half stone. So the thing that was dawning on me was there's a finite amount of time here. So as much as he looked okay in the first round, I was like, he's not moving quite as quickly as normal. And I think that's going to get worse, not better.
I think that when I was watching the fight, I thought the first round was fairly close. I was probably edging towards Martin Bakole. The second round, I thought that Martin Bakole started to come into it. I saw him land a couple of nice uppercuts. Parker landed a right hand, which Martin Bakole started to sort of shake off. And then very, very quickly, it unraveled. Now, on the stream itself, we were only able to see what the DAZN cameras allowed us to see, which was obviously
we couldn't. Yeah.
Couldn't heal. It was the right hand of Joseph Parker. It lands on the top of the head of Martin Bakole. Normally when I speak about the senses being scrambled, it's around the equilibrium, which is the top of the ear. That can really, really scramble your senses of balance, and that's why we saw him do the sort of wobbly dance, Martin Bakole. However, it did land on the top of the head. It didn't look like the sort of shot that would take you out at heavyweight. These are big guys. I understand that. It was a Joseph Parker that I think you noted was a stone heavier than...
Much heavier, yeah. Like, I think he was over a stone heavier or something like that. Maybe at least a stone. And interestingly, he's been photographed with that geezer. The guy who everyone gets photographed with, but the doctor before they all make the weight gain. Exactly. Now, I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong, to be fair, no. But he does look a lean 267 pounds, and he looked a stronger puncher than we've seen him before. But that is going to come with the size, and it is a dodgy place to take a punch halfway on the skull. Yeah, I mean that's a softer part of the head, apparently.
Getting photographed with that doctor is like having Drake stick a bet on you. You just don't want it.
You're going to get popped.
For good or for bad. Yeah, for good or for bad, you don't want it.
Wasn't he the doctor, the last kid who got popped for bloody the hardest, worst steroids?
Dennis McCann. He was the doctor for Dennis McCann. He was the doctor that was
Why do these cunts need doctors?
Who knows? Too much. more money than sense a lot of the time. So yeah, obviously Martin Bakole goes down. He's up on my account within 7. He's turned to the ref within 8, and the ref called it off. Now, again, this is why I speak about the DAZN camera angles. At the time, we were saying, okay, is that a premature ref stoppage? We had half the panel were debating that it wasn't a premature stoppage. I myself felt very strongly that it was a premature stoppage. And then I realised how quickly Billy Nelson, Martin Bakole's trainer, was up on the ring apron. Now, obviously, there's been mixed... You've
been criticised for it, haven't you?
There's been criticism, but there's been a mixture. I saw an interview with Andy Lee, Joseph Parker's trainer, and Billy Nelson, where he said he thought it was a good stoppage. I've seen different media outlets say that they thought that it was a good stoppage. My problem, I should say, with this is that Billy Nelson is, in my opinion, a huge hypocrite for doing so. Now, the words that came out of his mouth were, there are too many brave coaches out there. And if you're talking about brave coaches, I mean, all we've got to do realistically is go back to Martin Bakole's first loss. Now, Martin Bakole's first loss was against Michael Hunter, very, very capable heavyweight, a heavyweight capable of upsetting many people. I felt that he beat Povetkin in a decision where it ended up, I think, a draw at the end of that one. Gave Alexander Usyk a good competitive fight, albeit in loss, up down at cruiserweight, I should say. But Michael Hunter had Bakole in some big problems. Bakole apparently had suffered a injury to his shoulder in that fight. And Bakole, let's have it right, asked Billy Nelson on his stool to quit. He said he's got no more. And Billy Nelson, in my opinion, my interpretation, again, allegedly, I could be wrong on this, forced Bakole to get up off his stool and to go out for the next round. Now that, for me, is a brave cornerman. And the reason I would perceive it as that, and the reason I feel strongly about this, is because in that moment, that was when Martin Bakole, okay, you've told Jim stories about this guy, but he's never performed on the big stage. That fight was at York Hall, so I really think it does summarise it. York Hall was here, and Riyadh season I can't reach up to, yeah? So when you're boxing on Riyadh season, and we come to find out after the fight that you've been told that regardless of the result, win, lose or draw, you will still be boxing on that May Day, all of a sudden, you are what some people would now call a cash cow. And now you have the lack of reluctancy to pull your man out and to be able to say, yep, there's too many brave cornermen in this game. And I would say that trait wasn't shown in the Michael Hunter fight. So why was it then shown in that fight against Joseph Parker?
Well, the coaches are allegedly supposed to know their fighters better than anyone. Okay? And coaches are supposed to be the ones to step up and say when to fight, when not to fight, yada, yada, yada. And managers tend to be the ones that are the more greedy ones, the one who want the money, the one who'll take any fight because they're just trying to cash in on you, right? So you got coaches protecting the fighter, managers trying to get you as much money as possible. Different agendas completely. Now, the problem here is the coach and the manager are both Billy Nelson. And
interesting.
So he stands to make a significant profit by advising Bakole, take the fight. Get hard, get you out there quickly, don't worry about it. And I just think that, and I'm not saying that that's exactly what happened from Billy Nelson, but when you have been known to be like, get back out there and fucking fight, and then all of a sudden you do a complete 180, it does beg the question as to why, when this is the grandest stage of them all, right? This is the Champions League of boxing here. You're not in Sunday League, which is where that happened. The original, get back out there happened. And I do wonder whether or not, but let's be real here. Loza made a great point on the stream, in my opinion, which was that if you're a professional athlete, you should not be showing up at any point, even at whatever point of the year it is, in that level of out of shape. If you want to be a contender for a world title, he was already 285 pounds in his last fight, and let's be honest, he wasn't slim then. Now, for him to go from 20 stone to 22 and a half stone, you had Loz, saying like it's just a disgrace, basically, because you got to take this shit seriously if you're a pro athlete. Even me, as a 300-pound man lately, I always go, I got to do X amount so that I don't put more weight on because I can't eat, and I just have to have that level of self-respect. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And Loz is making jokes on there going, your footwork was better than Bakole's because you're actually just keeping yourself in shape. He is clearly an all or nothing type of character, it would appear, because even at the minimal level of boxing training that I've watched you do when you haven't got a boxing camp, you're burning so many calories off just doing basic training for boxing, let alone you start in camp. So it feels like Martin Bakole is very much an all or nothing. When I'm not in camp, I'm eating the world and I don't give a fuck. And I think if you want to win a world title, bro, it's time to get serious.
Bro, I still am, but I'm boxing on Misfits, yeah. Me and you were out in LA. I'd go out and get smashed with you, and I would be down in that gym paying for it on the treadmill the next morning. Do you know what I mean?
Even in Saudi, in the last Saudi trip, Fury Usyk, your elbows are all fucked. You're having to recover from an injury, but you're still training like a fucking madman. Yeah. Now, this is someone who's an influencer boxing, at a very high level for that level, but we're talking about world titles, and you've got killers coming for your head, Martin Bakole, and he's just taking his foot off the gas to a point where he's letting himself down.
When you've got the reputation as being the bogeyman in the heavyweight division as well, maybe you get lured into a full sense of security of thinking, well, these guys aren't going to take fights against me, right? But Billy Nelson said that Martin Bakole hadn't sparred since August. Now, I retired from boxing for 3 years. Before the Misfits opportunities came, that boxing wasn't paying the bills, and I just decided, you know what, let's knock it on the head. I didn't ever go 8 weeks without sparring, let alone 8 months without sparring. Now, in that 8 months, right, there's been probably 100 heavyweight fights, but just notable heavyweight fights that I personally, if I'm a boxer and I'm in the mix and I'm spoken about and I'm coming off a good win out in America on a Riyadh season card, I've got my eye on it just in case there's a pullout. Notable heavyweight fights in that time. You had Joshua against Dubois. You had Fury against Usyk too. You had Wardley against Clark, the rematch. You had Chisora against Warlin. And not only did you have Daniel Dubois against Joseph Parker on this card, you also had Zhang against Kabayel on this card. For me, that's enough reason. I'm not saying to be ready for a 12-round fight, but that is enough reason to stay in shape and be ready that if you get in there, you're going to be able to put your best foot forward at least. So I think it will be a big learning curve. I also think it's something that won't, because of the promise of His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, won't derail the career of Martin Bakole too much. But this needs to be the wake-up call. This needs to be the time that you go, listen, that might be able to happen once, but one, you're not getting the phone call again because we know you're not in shape, and maybe a lesser heavyweight who is a little more consistent with their lifestyle would have been able to put on a bit more of a spectacle. But two,
any of the top 10 would have showed up in better shape than him. Any of them.
I think Ajit Kabayel could have got back in the ring and done better.
After that fight, yeah. And we can't take you seriously if you don't take yourself seriously. And that's something he needs to prove to the boxing world now of like, he can never let himself get that out of shape again between fights. And the lads on the stream were like, well, Ricky Hatton did it. And I'm like, you know what you've just done? You've named one guy in the last 25 years who managed to make that work, who got fights easily because he had a massive audience. The exception to the rule does not disprove the rule, man. Like, this is the rule. Stay in shape.
I think if you were a watcher of the stream, you're lucky because it was a brilliant stream. But I just want to put across the reason I was so infuriated by the situation is I bang on to you lot about Martin Bakole all the time. I have done for a lot longer than, just before the Jared Anderson. I really do believe in his capability in this division. So hopefully we can see better from him. Two men that we have to now speak about that we did see way, way better from is obviously Dmitry Bivol, the new unified, undisputed, I should say, world champion at light heavyweight, and Artur Beterbiev. How did you see that one? On the night, I believe you had it a little bit closer than I had it.
I said it was either one round up for Bivol or a draw. And I rescored it this morning, and I basically gave it 6-5 to Bivol with one of the rounds, the last round, not the very last round, but the remaining round that I'm not counting, as a draw round. And Bivol did enough to win that fight, in my opinion, and BETERBIEV didn't this time. It's weird because as much as I've only scored it to Bivol by a round, it was such a dazzling performance. It feels like I may have underscored it to him in my head, but I'm like, I did it round by round, and that's how I had it. But BETERBIEV just didn't. He wasn't able to bully Bivol the way he did last time, and Bivol did all of the things he did well last time, but for longer and hit a bit harder. I think he was planting his feet a bit more. He wasn't backing away in those exchanges as much. And visually, obviously, last time there was times where he was just tucking and running, and it wasn't enough coming back. This time, he was willing to do whatever it took, and he proved me wrong. And what a great fighter, and two great fighters. It was a great fight.
Yeah, I think that both men showed in certain areas they were better. I think Dmitry Bivol was a little bit better in soaking up and sustaining the attacks of Bivol was better in soaking up and sustaining the attacks of BETERBIEV, and I think that BETERBIEV was a little bit better actually in his defence of what was coming back at him from Dmitry Bivol. I think it was so high level that there's actually a lot that was taken on the gloves, slipped by just a whisker that without the audio on, which we don't have when we're watching it, you're not able to pick up on maybe. But I think the right man won. My interpretation of it on the night was that I was scoring it with one swing round that I found it really hard to score, which was the second. With that round, I was scoring it by 2 points to Bivol on the night, 116-114, I'd say. But if I was to have given that round to BETERBIEV, which I think looking back on it, quite a few people did, then I obviously scored it one round to Bivol, much like the first fight, very, very close. The difference being, in this fight, I feel like Dmitry Bivol did actually finish the stronger man, whereas in the first fight, BETERBIEV took over a lot more. Would you like to see the trilogy going straight back into that one, or would you rather see him go down different routes?
If BETERBIEV wants to fight Bivol again, it needs to be immediately because he is 40 years old. And if there was... people were getting annoyed, I think, on the stream because I was like, BETERBIEV, to me, his feet don't actually look as good as last time. And he's struggling to keep on top of Bivol. He's slowing... And everything about BETERBIEV slowed down a little more for me towards the end of the fight, as opposed to last time when it kept ramping up round after round after round. So, and I'm looking at those knees strapped up, and I'm thinking, you've probably got one left at this level in you, in my opinion. One more chance at beating Bivol. So yeah, if they're going to do it again, don't skip it for another one. But if I'm BETERBIEV, I consider retirement potentially. He's really... That was rough to watch at times when I'm like, oh, if you could just move that back foot in a bit quicker, and if you could just close the distance a bit, cut the ring off a bit more, and he just couldn't do it the way he did it last time. And I only see that getting a bit worse for him rather than better with age. Do you know what I mean? But if they want to do it again, they're the greatest, dance partners. I could never argue against that. It was a fucking unbelievable fight.
What I do think is when you look elsewhere in the division, and we'll talk about a couple of guys that boxed in the same weight division and very, very highly ranked shortly, but when you look elsewhere in the division, I do still think that even if we are under the assumption that BETERBIEV can maybe replicate what he's done in the 2 fights but can't get that much better at the age he gets, there's still a massive drop-off from these 2 guys to the contenders below them, I would say. So,
well, the number one was Benavidez, right? Was that the one that were trying to line up for it?
Yeah, Benavidez may be the exception. I'm more sort of thinking Callum Smith. I think that Benavidez would be someone that personally I'd be probably more interested in, because I'm probably speaking from selfish reasons of wanting to see something a little bit different from what I've seen. I think both fights played out very similar. Different timings of when each man had success, but in terms of a stylistic fight, you know, let's say for example, Fury against Wilder 1, you had a twitch fest, right, with a couple of people, a couple of times Fury going down. Second fight, you had a beating, and the third fight, you had an all-out war. Whereas BETERBIEV Bivol, you know, we've seen a very similar fight twice. I think we'd see it at the same time again. Very, very high level, but at the same time, you know, is my appetite hungry for something a little bit different, I'd say. So maybe I'd like to see him go in
maybe they should
directions.
do Benavidez versus Smith, and then the winner of that. I mean,
that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. Zhang against Ajit Kabayel. Really, really, really interested to hear your thoughts on this one. I think, right, because I had a little accumulator on the fights, and I think that Zhang may well have been a slight favourite going into this fight. And I think that a lot of my friends who are more casual boxing fans, who watch and I say casual boxing fans, with the introduction of Riyadh season, they're actually a lot more clued up now on their boxing than ever, because instead of getting a big, you know, a real big card that attracts all the casuals once every, you know, 4 or 5 months, now we're getting them almost on a monthly basis with the introduction of Riyadh season and the Ring magazine cards and whatnot. But a lot of my friends were saying, oh, this should be Zhang, right? And I think that on the night, none of us around the table in our predictions backed Zhang. I think we all backed Ajit Kabayel.
I think maybe 1 or 2 backed Zhang, maybe 1. But like, it's weird because Zhang, given his record, you know, everyone respects him. He's a feared man in the division. But the styles-wise, you just look at Kabayel with the age and the output and that high energy, intensity, combination punching, which the likes of which you just don't see at heavyweight, and the body shots that are probably the best in the division. And I just thought, I can't see Zhang lasting with you. Yeah, unless he knocks you out, which he knocked them down, then you're fucked.
I think that my reservation for Kabayel, although I did back him to win the fight, my reservation for him was that I'd never truly seen him chin checked. I'd seen him in there with Derek Chisora. It's good 5-6 years ago now. His career stagnated somewhat. It plateaued a little bit before he got the
Wasn't it the way he beat Zhang though? It wasn't the fact that he won. It was like he walked him down. Like no one's ever done that to him.
Even the likes of Filip Hrgović, when I've watched that fight back, had to have moments where he went on the back foot. I'm not saying he didn't go forward, but he had to have moments when he went on the back foot and wasn't able to sustain the pressure against Zhang. Joe Joyce walked him down. How did that go? Not well. Not fucking well, I'm afraid. Do you know what I mean? And Joseph Parker, a man who we rate very, very highly at the top of the division, literally from the first bell, understood, okay, you're the bigger man. You can cut off the ring against me. Let me wait to drain you a little bit. Ajit Kabayel maybe had 1 round, which was the opening one, when he used that footwork a little bit. And then immediately he started to back Zhang up, and literally he battered the body of Zhang in that fight. And for me, it was a shocking performance. And you wouldn't normally think this about a fight that I predicted that fighter to win. But as you say, it was the method of victory, wasn't it?
Yeah, and look, it does look like they're lining up Parker versus Kabayel now. And you compare the 2 performances, Parker's win where he had to come through 2 knockdowns and he was dancing around on the outside and outboxing Zhang. But to dominate Zhang the way Kabayel did, he is going to be the favourite coming into that fight. And I look at him and I think stylistically he's a fucking horrible matchup for a lot of fighters in that division. And I don't know what his limit is. I think his ceiling could be incredibly high.
Well, this is where I come on to what I want to see next for Ajit Kabayel, because I think that Joseph Parker has done enough now in terms of the wins that he's had consecutively, pulling off upsets now. Deontay Wilder, obviously going on to Zhang, that was an upset at the time. I think a lot of people felt that Zhang would win that one, especially with the performances over Joe Joyce, who had beaten Joseph Parker. And then again, I understand an out-of-shape Martin Bakole, but a lot more came to light after the fight with Martin Bakole. Going in there, we were thinking, right, well, Parker would do well to come through this one. I think he deserves the crack at a world title, and I would personally like to see the rescheduled fight between Joseph Parker and Daniel Dubois, rather than Daniel Dubois somewhat skipping the queue, going in with Usyk. I have seen that fight play out before. I'm a huge fan of Daniel Dubois, by the way, a huge fan, but I've seen it play out, and I think that me and you would agree the same sentiment, that we both think that Daniel Dubois has improved since then, but does history rewrite itself a little bit, maybe? I don't want to put words in your mouth here. How do you feel about that fight between Dubois and Usyk? Because I personally didn't feel like it was as close as maybe some people look back on it as being.
Yeah, I don't think it was a close fight. I think Dubois had one good moment, which became the story of the fight. People then forget like how many rounds Dubois was getting outclassed, right? And if anything, when I watched Dubois dismantle Hrgović, dominate Anthony Joshua, it just made me rate Usyk even higher, because I'm like, fuck me, what did you do to this guy? Like, but there is a possibility that Dubois has closed the gap significantly since that fight. We just don't know how much. And that's the X factor here. And I think when you do a job on Anthony Joshua the way Dubois did, we can all look at AJ's defense and say it wasn't up to par and and he fought a bad fight. But I think that is going to make the Riyadh season guys just go, after that, and the name of Dubois growing significantly, in stature since that, they're going to want to make that. They're going to want to put him in there with Usyk, because they know they haven't got many fights with Usyk left. And the dream is, for I guess, I don't know if they're thinking like this, but I think about it in almost like a Vince McMahon style, whereas you don't want a guy retiring with the belt. You want the young, new guy to take the belt off of him and reign and dominate and have that name on the resume and go, we've got the champion now. If we all think that the best guy in the world is retiring, it kind of means whoever is the champion, there's a little asterisk next to their name of, well, they are the best in the world, but only because the best in the world retired. So in an ideal scenario, Usyk loses one of his last two fights, and they seem to be betting the house on Dubois and just fast-tracking him into that position.
Well, I think that if it was the Dubois fight next, then Kabayel against Joseph Parker could make a lot of sense. The winners fight each other. That could play out well. My reservation towards that would be that by the time those fights have played out, you've possibly had an Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury fight. I believe that Tyson Fury will probably come out of retirement for that one. That could throw someone into the mix. There might be other contenders around that time.
Can we explore that real quick?
Go on then.
If Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury beats the other guy, they'll want a trilogy with Usyk as their final fight of their career. And at that exact moment, Alexander Usyk will also be, probably after Dubois, if he beats Dubois, on his final fight of his career. And he may go, you know what? I'll make a shitload more money having a trilogy fight with AJ or Fury than I would fighting fucking Kabayel or Parker. So I would not be surprised if Usyk's final two fights go Dubois and then AJ or Fury.
Yeah, and that's what I would agree with too. And this is where I want to make my case here for Ajit Kabayel. People will think I'm crazy. I think Ajit Kabayel is stylistically the most intriguing matchup at this point in time for Alexander Usyk for me. I look at let's remember, right, 3 consecutive stoppages now in a row. Arslan Makhmudov, I understand we didn't really know what sort of level he is, and maybe we still don't really know what level he is. Frank Sanchez is a very capable heavyweight with a good team behind him. And now Zhang, a man that, we know gas is in those later rounds, but a man that Kabayel was able to not only neutralise, but stop off the back of being dropped heavy. He was chin-checked, he came back from it. Now, if there is one slight fault in Alexander Usyk's game. And let's be honest, we're clutching at straws here. I know we are, because I don't think there are. I think Alexander Usyk is a brilliant all-rounder and best of this generation. If there's one slight area that is still having the faintest question mark over it, it's his body resistance. And that's not something that gets better with age. I think to put Alexander Usyk in with what now I don't think you would argue is probably the best heavyweight body puncher in the entire division.
Easily.
Is something that I would be so intrigued by. I'm not saying I'd make Kabayel a favourite in that one, but it is a fight that I'd really like to see. So if I found out tomorrow that they were going to reschedule Daniel Dubois against Joseph Parker and that Kabayel was going to be getting the shot against Alexander Usyk, I'd be over the moon to see that one.
Frank Warren ain't going to let that happen, is he?
No. Is that just me, or does that fight interest you, Brian?
I completely agree. I think Kabayel is the one where, well, he hasn't fought Usyk yet for a start, and he is the most impressive guy outside of, Parker has a win over Zhang, but his win is better, for example. And I feel sorry for Parker because he is a great fighter and he's up in that group of fighters. But we've seen Dubois, we've seen AJ, we've seen Fury, and Kabayel brings different problems to the table, right? Yes, he's a good body puncher, but it's not just the idea that he's going to stop Usyk with a body punch. He's going to slow Usyk down, which is one of the things that no one has really done. As good as Fury's body punches were, because he'd improved them for that fight, to be fair to him, because he was never a great body puncher, in my opinion, Fury, in terms of, he was good, but he wasn't great, but he'd improved them. But he's never going to be, the size of him is all wrong to be a great body puncher. He's never going to be able to do what Kabayel can do. So if Kabayel can get Usyk slowed down even, to a level that we've not seen him before, there's a chance he can beat him because he's a real heavy-handed motherfucker. And he doesn't just throw. Like a lot of people, when they throw against Usyk, they're scared of getting countered. And they don't fight their normal aggressive style. And they don't take those risks. Kabayel is a combination puncher and is a lot fitter than most heavyweights. And his feet aren't bad either. So I think that the ingredients he brings are really the most troubling we would see against Usyk. But I just think that where the money goes is where the eyeballs go in. So I expect that it'll be Dubois and either AJ or Fury after that.
I'd back Usyk to win that fight, but I'd back him to win it in an absolute war. I think that Usyk would be forced to fight a fight for probably the first time consistently over 12 rounds that wasn't his fight. And I still think he would pull it off because I do rate him as the best man, but I think that Kabayel could force him into an
He wouldn't be on the front foot the way we've seen him on the front foot. Like, it would have to be more like AJ1, where he's just dancing around, not standing still, really, which is hard to do at his age now. It's even harder. It's been a few years since he did that.
Fight of the night for me, at the end of the show, I think I got it wrong because I gave sort of performance of the night. We didn't go out fight of the night. It's got to be Callum Smith against Joshua Buatsi. It opened up the show. What a spectacle that was for us to watch.
One of the best British boxing fights of all time for me. Like, really a war. Everything we want to see. I mean, the fact that was the first fight of the night as well, we were like, what the fuck are we watching here? Like, what is this? It's like WrestleMania for boxing fans, I guess. And two great performances. And I just think that the technique of Smith really was the edge, right? I think they both had the same dog determination, the heart, the will to win. But Smith was just a bit more defensive and a bit cleverer with his shots. And that was the edge.
I think so too. I think that there was no controversy in the decision in that fight, so it's not really one that I need to watch back and rescore. But I just feel for myself that I have to rewatch it back on this channel because of the pure excitement of watching it. What was served up from us. I think that Smith, for such a tall fighter, has adapted so well to the heavyweight division. The light heavyweight division coming up from super middleweight. The inside work was brilliant by him. The corner work from Buddy McGirt that we heard going into that 12th and final round.
Amazing.
He said, you don't need these legs at the end of this fight because there's three of us and we can carry you back. Can you give me everything in this round? And that, for me, it was a Rocky-esque moment. I know you love that. You love that Teddy Atlas moment, don't you, in terms of the fireman?
It was on that level. It was inspirational, and good coaches they find the right words at the right moment. And when he was talking to Smith, because BUATSI was he was just trying to outman him and just who wants it more. And it was a really hard position to be in for Smith because you knew he was up on the cards. But you can throw it all away with one bad round against someone like BUATSI who's marching forward like a demon. And the words he found, if anyone hasn't seen them, I highly recommend finding that on social media because it was so fucking inspirational. And you were like, absolutely, I'll go out and give everything. What a fucking line.
And all of a sudden, we've now got a man that wasn't at the forefront of our mind back right in the fold. I know that, again, I've always said it's winner stays on, but it's also performer stays on Riyadh season with Turkey Al Sheikh, and now you definitely can see Callum Smith being in big fights. As for BUATSI, is now the time to make, I mean, it's always been the time, but is now more than ever. Now the rankings don't matter as much because you're not going to be mandatory for that world title. Is it BUATSI against Yard that we need to see next?
Yeah, that's the fight, mate. I've always wanted to see that fight, and now more than ever, it makes sense. There's no point in either guy looking elsewhere. And I believe Frank Warren has kind of patched things up with Yard, so now they can move forward. So hopefully that's next.
And as for Smith, you've got Benavidez there. If he doesn't end up fighting either Artur BETERBIEV or Dimitri Bivol. Also, David Morrell, who just lost to Benavidez. I think that'd be a really, really interesting fight. So definitely two more there that I'd like to look forward to. Now, Hamza Sheeraz against Carlos Adames is a fight that I need to sit back and score again, right? We had a wind-up with you. I don't know if you've watched the full stream back, right? The boys were going, he's not going to believe it when we, because it was so wrapped up in our mind. It was like, okay, cool.
I went for a piss because I was like, this is a win for Adames.
There you go. And it was so like, Hamza Sheeraz, he stepped up. He's took on a challenge very early on, earlier than some pros do in their career, and especially, in boxing years and whatnot since turning professional. And he came up short. There was apparently an injury there, but no excuses. Carlos Adames had won the fight. You went out the room. I said to the boys, let's tell him that Hamza Sheeraz has won it. Let's have a wind up with him and see his reaction. And because we did that, then when we told you the truth, you went, I still don't fucking believe you. So we had to literally prove it to you to show you that it had been given as a draw. I'm going to rescore it. So I'll give my thoughts in that latter video. But just for yourself, how do you see that one?
Hamza started well. And apparently he broke his hand somewhere in the fight. And that kind of explains a bit of the lack of activity from him. Like, if you're in agony throwing that hand, it's going to be rough. And, the jab, I think it was his left hand. The jab is one of the ways Hamza likes to get people under control. Then he applies the pressure. He's on the back foot and he breaks you down slowly. And then he starts pouring the pressure on and on the front foot. And the front foot never really came from Hamza Sheeraz. And I think I've got to give some credit to Adames for what he did, because he adapted his game plan, moving the head around, and really became hard to land flush on for Hamza Sheeraz. And he was throwing, punches and bunches from all different angles as well. And he was just a really tricky fighter and a hard fighter. Like, when he did get clipped, he just kept coming, right? No fucking backing down at all. And he kept Hamza Sheeraz honest and really kept Sheeraz in a cagier state of mind than what he normally is. So he must have been fucking hitting hard. And I think that Adames won that fight, but I do think it's winnable for Sheeraz in the future if he can avoid breaking the hand and adapting the game plan. But what he needs is a plan B, because it felt like when my normal thing doesn't work, and obviously the hand is an important part of that, but I didn't feel like he had another idea to go to, and I think that's going to be something there for in title fights. Some lads come up and they're not going to fucking answer to your first plan.
I'd very much echo your sentiments on that. I think it's a winnable fight for Hamza Sheeraz in the future. I think it's sounds really disrespectful to Carlos Adames. I think this is a fight that he could win and almost win quite comfortably on another night, but obviously on the night, absolutely no dispute that I think that Carlos Adames won that fight. If I was part of Team Sheeraz, obviously we'd have to see the severity of the injury and how long that's going to lay you off. I think that this is one of those cases where instead of doing, what David Price did, for example, when he lost to Tony Thompson, going straight back in for that immediate rematch, I think this is a case of go away, have one or two more, maybe against those trickier styles that are able to get in on the inside of you but a lesser level than a Carlos Adames, and we revisit that fight down the line. We know that he's a real fan favourite on Riyadh season, not just of His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, but we've seen the way that the crowd go wild for Hamza Sheeraz out there. So I think he'll learn a lot from that fight. Should probably have a loss to his record by now, but at the same time as that, I think that we're going to have many, many exciting nights from Hamza Sheeraz going forward. So maybe not the exact result that should have been given, but, you know, not a massive stain on the card. Quickly run you through the last two fights. Virgil Ortiz against Israel Madrimov. I thought that was going to be a contender for fight of the night. It did liven up in the last couple of rounds, and Virgil Ortiz Jr. obviously getting the win in that one. Surprised you at all how Israel Madrimov boxed early on?
I'm a bit done with him, which is a bit harsh maybe, because it's only been a couple of flatter performances, because he used to be very dynamic ages ago. But I was just like, you know what, mate? It's Riyadh season. I know it's a hard fight in front of you, but to move this much and to not really push the action, I just thought, I'm not arsed, man. Like, and that's the thing, right? When the level of the card is this high rather, if you have someone who isn't engaging as much and is trying to be negative, it really does show up, because everyone else is fighting for world titles and fighting as if their life depends on it. So, yeah, all credit to Ortiz. I thought he was the better fighter, and I don't really care about watching Madrimov again until he does something to show me.
It was weird for me because he showed more hesitancy, and you might call it fear, but that, you know, some might feel that that's harsh for someone in my position to say when I'm sat at home watching it. But he showed more fear, I would say, against Virgil Ortiz Jr. than he did against Terence Crawford. And yes, Virgil Ortiz Jr. has a higher knockout percentage than Terence Crawford, but Terence Crawford's a pound for pound man, a man that's been through the divisions and fought everyone and champions, whatnot. So yeah, a little bit disappointed. Need to see a big performance from him to come back. Another man that I personally feel we need to see a few big performances from, both in and outside of the ring, is Shakur Stevenson. I've actually watched that fight back because I was worried that maybe I was a little bit too negative in my stance on Shakur Stevenson on the night, in terms of, if you're not going to be a fighter that really goes for the kill, and this might sound ironic coming off of 3 knockdowns and a 9th round stoppage, if you're not going to be that fighter, be the other way. Show us the entertainment. Show us, you know, the sort of slick movement and embarrass your opponents and whatnot. And Shakur Stevenson is just very much a fighter for me that I don't get the excitement to tune in and watch him fight. However, with the right dance partners, very, very possibly. Josh Padley, again, another one that came in on, 3 days' notice or something like that. And the complete contrast, you'd say, to Martin Bakole in terms of staying ready, staying in shape, actually coming in, making weight, having to jump on the scales probably around 24 hours after he got off an aeroplane. Huge credit to himself. But as for Shakur Stevenson going forward, what are your general thoughts?
I'm not on the hype train by any means. I'm going to need to see a lot more, because obviously that kid is a brave lad. He was very professional. He did put Bakole to shame a bit in that sense, and he brought a decent fight. You know what I mean? He went for it. He wasn't, standing off. He was trading with him. He was going for it. He was giving his all. But you're an electrician and you were working on a building site 3 days ago. Shakur Stevenson claims he's the greatest boxer in the world. When you're the greatest boxer in the world, people who turn up from a job site three days ago don't fucking gan 9 rounds with you. Yeah. And I know he's not the hardest of punchers. I don't care. You're supposed to be the greatest boxer in the world. So the point is, he's selling himself as best as he can. And maybe he needs to make more of an effort to be more disliked, because people are not going to tune in to watch Shakur Stevenson because he's a great entertaining fighter in that sense. They're going to tune in only to see you lose. You've got to make people believe you're going to lose. You got to make them want to hate you, because there's not a lot to enjoy when he's in the ring, in compared to some other defensive fighters who can also bang. I'm sort of lukewarm on him right now. I believe he's talented. I'm not disputing that, by the way. I'm not there with him or not.
Yeah. I think we could probably agree on that one. One thing that we could definitely agree is that the card was an absolute banger, and what we're seeing so far from the Riyadh season cards and what I'm highly anticipating to be replicated on the Ring Magazine cards is just stacked quality. No empty seats will be necessary for the first couple of fights, especially if the it's not even rumored anymore when the fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. takes place. We'll be really looking forward to that one. Fingers crossed we're out in the stadium covering that one. But either way, there'll be plenty of coverage and build-up on the Pain Game as we look forward to that one. Brian, thank you for giving me your time today, mate. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully soon we'll be catching up on a call to maybe speak about a fight that I might have in the pipeline. So we're hush-hush on that for the moment, but something dropping very, very soon about that. Pain Game linked in the description, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you go over there, hit that. You can see all of the content coming out off of that. And thank you very much for joining me again, mate. I will see you all in the next one.